real estate over there and hustle over here.
Introduced me to one of my good friends is my real estate partner. His name is Tony. And basically Tony would just sit me down and explain to me how the deals work and how to get the deals done and what kind of credit you need and all those things. So I started small, of course, and I just started to add on to that. So I started residential, and then I got to commercial, and now I'm buying multifamily.
All right, so welcome back to. I always want to say "Who Got Nuts" podcast when I see this man. This is not my. That's not my show. So welcome back to Uninvited House Guest podcast. I'm Tony, your host. Today I have a friend of mine on the couch with us, a really good friend. I was fortunate to assist him in getting his first home. I'm sure he knows a lot of other realtors, so he picked me. So I'm glad we was able to do that and get him to that first house. He's an HBCU grad, as you know. We rock with HBCU grads heavy here. So we went to Fayetteville State. We'll probably talk about that a little bit as well. But yeah, man, he's a great guy. He's actually, if I'm being honest with you guys, he's the reason why I've had this podcast, actually. So he had me on a guest on his show one time with a friend of mine, Joy. Obviously, if y'all watch season 1, y'all know who that is. But we literally did a show on his podcast, and that was inspiration for this podcast that you see today. So we definitely want to thank you, Eric, for being here today. But also tell us anything I didn't say. So tell us a little bit more about yourself.
First and foremost, man, I appreciate the invite of coming on to your podcast. It's always good to being a podcaster and interviewing people. You know, I don't get interviewed much, so it's always good to sit down and be on the other end of that and see how you do things. But again, appreciate it. But no, you pretty much explained it. You know, I was in the process of wanting to finally get my own home. Got tired of the renting process. It was in that influx of COVID happening. Lease was about to be up, and I said, I think it's time to make that decision. So I remember giving you you kind of hinted at it a little bit, but you wasn't saying, are you serious? Are you good? You pretty much, it is what it is, man. And maybe you did that because as a realtor, you have clients and you don't want to, I don't know how you roll. I don't know if you cold call. I don't know if you're passing out cards or you just, I don't know. But I've always told you I admire what you do, and I'm always paying attention. So I figure why not use the network that I have and ask you to help me out with that. And I was very adamant about getting somebody that looked like me. That's number one. I was very adamant about getting somebody that looked like me, that understands me, pay attention to my wants and needs and stuff like that. So you actually did all of that. So we're gonna stop there. Because again, I'm a podcaster, so I could talk, man. So
Appreciate that. So let's, I guess, take it back 1 second. So I always like to know people's frame of reference as far as when we talk about home ownership and the journey. Mm-hmm. Did your parents own homes coming up? And if so, was that a catalyst to your process? Or I know you said you was tired of renting, but in addition to that, was that something you seen? It was like, oh yeah, I know it's obtainable. What does that look like for you?
I want to say my parents are probably first generation home buyers. Okay. With my dad being in the military, I was born into the military. Okay. It wasn't later down the line. So, being a military dependent, it was all about, being on military installations and things like that. So it was always on base. And then I did stay overseas for a little bit with my family. And even at that point, it wasn't on base, but it was still a part of the military installation. So that process, I'm pretty much assuming that that's a rent thing, how that goes. So when we moved back, that was their process. When they moved back, he made sure to get a home, and the little bit I knew, I realized he did buy that home. So, and they're still staying in there, they're still staying in there right now. It's good to go back now. My dad with both my parents being retired, they getting into that money. Of course, it's just me and my sister. So I've been out of the house for a long time now. So he's finally, getting to the point where he's doing things. I swear every other month, I'm getting a picture. Hey, we redid the bathroom. Hey, we redid this part. Or when I go home, it's like, anything look different to you? So we always had those conversations as well, I think, we're doing it. Now that I'm older, we could have those conversations. Even though we was having those conversations before.
Yeah, it's different now.
Yeah, it's different now.
For sure. I definitely appreciate it. Actually, so I talked to my dad this past week, actually, and he paid off his house. which
congratulations to that.
So we were talking about that a little bit. He was saying like when I obviously signed the deal, 30 years did not seem realistic to me. Like as far as like the time was a lot shorter obviously than it was. If that makes sense. So he was like 30. He was like that's like life. Like in his head he was like yo like I paid the house off last week. I was like you did. So again that's definitely parents owning I think is always good because it gives you in your mind that it's possible. Right. But it's definitely again talking about our parents and like their ages is definitely not something that everyone did. So it's definitely kudos to them for sure. Yeah. Similar to that. So we talked. Obviously, you said you were kind of tired of renting, and for this time frame, this was 2020. So again, as we said, COVID time frame, things like that.
The heart of COVID. I mean, like we probably been home for what 3 months.
Been home for 3 months.
3 or 4 months by then.
So if you guys remember that time frame, the housing market was on fire, and I mean when I say on fire, people were buying houses were listed for literally hour if that, and they were gone. Right. So Eric had an idea, I'm sure, in his head of, hey, this is the house I want. And we kind of went down that path. And then as we went down that path, things kind of changed. So as a realtor, obviously you see in the market, you know what's happening. Right. I'm going to showings all the time, things like that. But when you're purchasing, this is your first time doing it, right? So for you, I'm sure it might have been scary or you had some kind of feelings or maybe you thought it was going to be one way and it was different. So can you tell us just about like what was happening in your mind when you enter the process? Again, you know you're ready to move, but what does that look like?
It was I don't consider myself somebody who gets scared or anything like that, but I was very apprehensive.
Okay.
I didn't know what to expect, and the reason why I was apprehensive because you have that mindset of being at a certain age and wanting things at a certain time. And when it doesn't happen that way for whatever reason, that could be finances, it could be moving, it could be maybe you got some things that you got to clear up. Or you don't think that you're ready. So when I had made that decision that this is what I wanted to do, and I'm going to talk from a customer standpoint and a client standpoint. I think once I realized that this is something I wanted to do, is when I realized what money was in my bank account. So I realized I said, this looks like I got a little something to do a little something. So once I finally made that decision of that's what I wanted to do, then I started looking at the calendar and I started looking at my timeline. Of course, with rent was going crazy, and I wouldn't advise anybody to do this, but I did this. I had promised myself that I'm not going to leave this apartment until it's time for me to buy.
Okay.
That ended up being more than a long time. I'm going to say it's a long time. Probably about 9 to 10 years. But, again, it was just me, so it really wasn't that big of a deal. But also rent was starting to go up. So with the apartment that I was in at the time, I came in at the time where, rent was fairly priced for anybody, And if you're going to move, you're going to go under their rates. So I said, nah, let me go ahead and stay where I'm at. So that's where the mindset came from. But also, I had to have a heart-to-heart on myself and say, hey, if I don't do this now, then I don't know what's going to happen. And what I mean by I don't know what's going to happen, I don't know where I'm going to be money-wise or whatever. I mean, I figure, money-wise, when I mean money-wise, I'm talking about as far as what I have at this particular moment.
For sure.
Can I curse? Shit happens. Shit happens, emergencies happen, and you never know what happens. And that cuts into whatever funds that you have for whatever reason. So that's where I was at the time. So once I made that decision, that's when I made the phone call to you. And when I made the phone call to you, I said right then, there's no turning back.
Fair enough.
I wasn't going to waste my time, and I definitely wasn't going to waste yours.
Right. And so to that point, so Eric, what I like about Eric, and obviously I work with a lot of different people, different backgrounds, things like that. But Eric, as I kind of told you guys his mindset already, but the key word I want to say was like he was committed to getting a home. Like he was like, yo, I'm not signing another lease. Like he was committed to getting home at that point. Obviously, he said he's in an apartment for a couple of years, But by the time he said, hey, let's do it, he was committed to the process. And again, in 2020, you had to be committed to the process because houses were going so fast. So there's a lot of people who started the process in 2020. They submitted some bids and they didn't work out for them. And they pretty much like, yeah, I'm just keep renting. Right, a lot of people got just fatigue. We call it buyer fatigue, right? They got fatigue on the process, and they're like, "Yeah, this must not be the time for me." So for you didn't get the fatigue. I think your what you wanted in a house maybe have changed according to the process. But like, could you explain to us, like, obviously you're committed to the process, but why were you so adamant about that?
I was adamant about it because I made my decision. I can't rent no more. You know, I can't rent no more, and that was a goal of mine. And I do totally understand where. And I was having this conversation the other day with somebody about how the mental is, and I totally understand it from one side where it's like, okay, if you could manage rent, then you can manage mortgage. Totally understand that. The other side of that is though the other miscellaneous is what I like to call it. And those are the things that you got to worry about. You got to worry about property taxes. You got to worry about HVAC. You got to worry about warranty. You got to worry about possibly HOA. You have to worry about all of those things. And luckily, with the type of work that I do right now, I'm pretty versed in those areas. So I already kind of knew what to look for and what I had. I want to say, I think when you and I was talking, you know, you'll tell me about them. You'll tell me about the spot, and then you'll say, okay, this is what the possible mortgage is for this range. But what I know exactly what I said after that. Okay, now add what the HOA is, because that's the way I think about it. Even when I had a car, even when I buy cars, before I buy a car, people worried about the car payment. I'm not worried about the car payment. I'm worried about the insurance. So whatever. So if the insurance is way priced out for what I'm normally paying, I'm not doing it.
It's not a deal.
Period. I'm not doing it. If you come to me tell me, oh, your insurance is going to be $300, $400 a month, I'm not getting that.
Fair enough. That makes sense.
Flat out. So I put that mindset to having a mortgage. So I think every time we talk, I said, okay, what's the what's the HOA on that?
Yep.
And I was like, okay, cool. All right. So that's where my mindset was. So I'm more liking it to pivoting. I had to pivot a lot.
Okay.
And you probably gonna get into this because we talk about this all the time, but I had to pivot. I had to probably pivot 4 or 5 times.
Oh yeah.
And the pivot was necessary based on the market
conditions,
based on the marketing conditions, and then based on what I was willing to compromise with and what I wasn't willing to compromise with.
So that's an excellent segue. So again, I always tell people or buyers that if you come in with an open mind, it makes the process easier. So a lot of people think, no, this is what I want. This is my dream. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. But let's go see what that looks like in real life. Because your dream may be from Zillow or Instagram or something you've seen that's happening in Texas. And we live in North Carolina. Completely different market. Real estate is very local. So to that, I know we've seen a couple houses before we got the one you actually got. But the first one we seen, I remember us seeing it. And
did you play in that?
I didn't. All right.
I always wanted to ask you that. Did you play in that?
No, you say, hey, I want to see it. I'm like, cool, whatever. So again, typically what happens in this process is people tell me what they want, their qualifications. I give them an email list. They get emails pretty much every day, 6 in the morning. From that, they favorite or heart what they want. They say, hey, Tony, I really want to go see this one. I'm available this time. Cool, we make an appointment. So in his case, I think the first one we actually wanted to see, we couldn't see it because it was literally sold before we got there. Right? This particular one is still available. We went there that day. I feel like it was an appointment right after ours too. Now I think about it. So appointment right after us. But we got there. Give us your initial thoughts. I feel like you were immediately was like, no, that's not it. I feel like that was your feeling. But I want to hear you kind of tell us if that's true or not.
That is definitely true.
Okay.
But that is 100% factual truth. But I wanted to see it through.
Fair.
So I wanted to see what I was looking at, and I wanted to finally get in the feel of being in the midst of the search. So, we pull up to this home, and I'm looking, and I'm like, what? But I wasn't looking to the point of saying, okay, am I being not in that sense. It was just like, okay, all right, E, here we go. So, so we walked into this property, and I'm looking around. We go through the door, and I'm like, it had a handicap ramp too. So clearly it was somebody who was disabled that lived in that home prior. So we went in there, looked, went through the ramp, went through the house, and the first part of the home, I think it was probably the den or the bonus room.
Yep.
I said, all right. So then we walked into the kitchen, and I'm saying, all right. Then I think we kind of got to the back, and I'm like, bruh, what is this, man? And then I think when I realized this is not going to be it, was the deck.
Yeah.
I never
Deck
forget
needed
it.
some work.
The deck needed some work, and I'm like, man, this is a structural issue. Again, this is me getting into my job. My job now, where it's like, oh shoot, that's gonna be structural engineering. This is not gonna pass. When appraisal gets done, bruh,
Hold it.
we know what's gonna happen with this. So in my brain, I'm thinking to myself, like, even before I even get to any of that, just hypothetically, if I decide to go through with this, I'm going to have there's going to be a tussle. There's going to be a push and shove with the seller on this, because I really believed in my heart that this was going to be, they wanted this to be sold as is.
It did.
And if y'all don't know what as is means, it means whatever this is what you pay for, and you handle everything else. Eric Sanders was not in that position to do that, and I knew I was not going to do that. So, and I gave it to Tony. Tony kind of sat back. He didn't really say much. He allowed me to go through that, but
all the emotions.
You let me go through all the emotion. I think that's where you were good at. Like, that was although we talked a lot, or we conversed about different things, that was our first time actually working together, and you allow me as a client to just kind of go through whatever feeling I had, and you did it jump in. So I got to give you props for that, because you'll be. I don't know how other people work, but you got some people that may be pushy. You got some other ones that could be aggressive, because maybe they want that sale that bad, or they're trying to make you feel like, oh, you need to do this or you need to do that. You did not do that, and I think that was when my nerves kind of calmed down, and I said to myself, all right, now really start kind of nailing down what you want.
So
I tell you, I'm a podcaster, man. You gotta stop something.
So I always tell people hey, come with we have our consultation. Say, come over with your wants and needs list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you can change anything internally to the house, but you can't pick it up and move it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, do you like the house? Is it good bones in the house? Things like that. These are the wants and needs, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then we say, hey, have must haves and then nice to haves, right? We always have that discussion. And then if there's, whatever that is, we can kind of look at that list. So that I kind of have a even list. But I always say the first house we look at is going to change that list, because you haven't walked into a house yet and seen what your wants really look like. So that I feel like in your process, everyone for that matter, I typically just look, I don't try to sell you because at the end of the day, you got to pay the mortgage, right? So tell me, hey, based on what you said, these are my list. This made the checkbox. It was good enough that you liked it when you came through your email that we wanted to see it. So, hey, based on the list you gave me before, are we still in line? That's usually how I do that process. Because again, ultimately, if you don't say it's it, I'm not going to push you. Because you have to live there. You got to pay the mortgage. You got to love it. And especially at COVID, because the way things were happening so fast, people felt like they needed to go ahead and just put an offer on something so they could get a house.
Right.
And to me, I was like, that's not really a good strategy, because you're going to at least be here 3-4 years, right? Like, it's going to be sometime. May not be forever, but it's going to be sometime.
Exactly.
So for me, like I said, I like how you actually just truly walk through the process with me. Like, I say, hey, this is what we're going to do. We came out the house and said, what you think? He said, I don't think it's it, but I'm going to refine my list. So literally, now the next day, the emails come in and look a little different based on what he saw and that initial conversation. So I thank you for truly like walking through the process and not saying, hey, that's the only type of house I want, or that's the only thing I want. So I like how that happened naturally. So typically, sometimes that's a push, and I'm like, oh, so maybe we should consider this because you said this.
Nah, you didn't have to push me. I remember vividly. There was 2 adjustments I made, and I remember making those 2 adjustments quickly. The first adjustment was, okay, the fact that you told me that inventory is going to be low. So when you told me inventory is going to low, I knew right then that I immediately had to change I had to refine my list. Because I think when we talked at first, I was very clear. I do not want a townhome, and I don't want a condo. Go figure. It's like, I said I didn't want that. You said cool. I said I want this. I said I'm not budging on this. I'm not budging on that. So I think I was checking the list every day. So I made that. I said, you know what? Let me go ahead and include condos and townhomes. So I put that in. Boom. That was the first thing. And I think that part of the other list, when homes were coming up, it was coming up in the North Lake area, and it was also coming up in Kannapolis. And I want to probably say like probably Rock Hill or somewhere. And I'm like, well, I don't work in South Carolina no more. I work either uptown or I work in the university area. So, and I was very, very clear at that point that I did not want to move into the university area. I just did not want to do it. And I think that was because I lived on the South Side since I've been here. And I'm like, man, I don't want to do that. And those 2 things changed quickly. So that's when it got interesting.
So I say that to say, it's okay to change your mind. It's okay to, once you get new information, to apply that to your home buying process. And like I said, Eric did just that. As you can see, obviously he moved into a townhome, which was not his first choice, but it fit the other criteria on his list.
Right.
Most importantly, budget, right? But all the other things. So, I don't know if it's okay for me to say, but I think his house is now worth about $100,000 more than he paid for it today if he sold it today. So kudos to you, obviously getting in there and saying, getting something and knowing that, hey, this is it, my forever spot, and I can now make it to investment, things like that going forward. But let's give us, I guess, some details. Like, so now that you live there, how do you feel? Like, do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you feel like it was a good decision, bad decision? Any buyer's remorse in general? Like, what does that look like?
I don't have buyer's remorse because it is something that I can actually benefit from in some capacity, whatever that is. As you just stated, it could be to sell it. If I decide to get to a point where I want to look for another property or something like that, I have the advantage to rent that, because basically the lucky part of me getting this in COVID is that my mortgage is not as high as maybe some of the mortgages that you see as of today.
Yeah.
So that is a plus for me. So sure. And I think I talked to you about this before. One thing about town, and I've learned this I just learned this. With townhomes and developments in these neighborhoods, you're probably going to get more renters than owners in those areas, depending on where you at. Yeah. And the area that I'm in, I want to say it was built in 96, 96 or something like that. So it was the first part. You've been there. So the first part, that was the first part they built. So I think where I'm at, that was the last part that's built. So back in that area is a lot of renters and things like that. And I talked to the HOA director. He had kind of, luckily for me, he was able to kind of, once we met each other, kind of found out he's frat. So I was able to, he said, okay, he was able to give me some information, and he kind of broke some things down to me, giving me the percentage of renters to owners and, renters to owners and stuff like that. So it gave me a different mindset of how I wanted to look at it. So no buyer's remorse. Since I've been in there, I was able to do a couple of things. Finally made a couple of upgrades. Made a couple of upgrades. Just happened to see a contractor doing a house behind me, and I just happened to walk outside and started asking them questions. And I went in there and looked, and I went in there and told him, like, hey, well, these are 2 or 3 things that I wanted to do. So he came in there, gave me a price, and I'm like, shit, I can't beat that price. And he would say, yo, I know I got some others, I got some other projects, but I'm willing to squeeze you in. I can get this done in a week. Mm-hmm. So he got it actually done in 3 or 4 days. So that's one of the major things that I've done so far. So that did add some, value to the home. But the area, it's in a university area, and luckily for me, while I was scoping that out, I was still kind of doing my research. I was able to realize down the street you got a Topgolf that was being built. Mm-hmm. You're next to IKEA, and then at that time on that stretch it was just nothing but woods. But I always said to myself, this might be a possibility to open up. Lo and behold, it's 2024, and it opened up. Mm-hmm. So they opened up that side. They opened up the side O'Neill right in front of STEM Academy. Mm-hmm. So that's 2 areas right there. They're still doing some work down that way. Then Sugar Creek opened up, and then directly right behind me in my backyard,
townhouses.
They built townhouses. So very nice townhomes too. So it worked out to it. It worked. I mean, make a long story short, it worked out to his benefit. That's and looking back at it. So
okay, I'm glad to hear that side of it. Mm-hmm. I guess my other question would be like, so that typically people, what year is this? How many years is it?
2024. It's 4 years now.
So 4 years later.
So September will be 4 years.
4 years later. So this is about the time where people like, hey, I love the space. I've grown the space. Where are you in that process? You still cool? You feel like you have a few more years in it? You ready to start looking? I know, I guess we know the mortgage rates are a little high right now, so you have to stomach if that's what you want to do or not, right? But what does that look like for you right now? Where do you feel mindset wise as far as is it time to upgrade or not? Due
to the circumstances of interest rates and mortgage payments and prices of homes, I'm going to stay right where I'm at for right now.
Fair enough.
I'm going to stay right where I'm at for right now. It's just me. I don't have kids. I'm not married. So it still benefits me as of right now. hopefully that will change later. But the way I'm hoping things teeter out, but it ain't gonna. I don't see no historic drops like we did probably 2 years ago. I don't see it. Yeah. And if that does happen, but it's not.
Yeah, the data doesn't support it. So, guys, this is a free tip. Dr. Lawrence Yin. You can follow him on LinkedIn. He's the chief economicus. I can't say that word. Economicus for the National Association of Realtors. He's the chief guy. He does obviously data crunching, a lot of good reports and things that I'm able to read to figure out what's going on in the market. But literally, we know there's not going to be still just inventory. I can't reduce anyways. Obviously, the Feds are talking about dropping the rate some. It's election season, so that may or may not happen. If it does, it's going to be probably late fall. So at this point, the market is actually like on an upturn. So typically, it was trying to trend towards 5. It looked like it's now trending towards 7. So I don't see it being influx in that sense. So definitely, like I said, just the data doesn't support. Obviously, it doesn't support a crash. Doesn't support a lot more homes coming in inventory. Obviously, real estate, I always tell people too, real estate typically is cyclical, whereas people normally buy around the school season because that's how families kind of move. With COVID, people typically kind of just jumped into something, which is why people do have buyer's remorse. So they just jumped into something so they could be in a new place. And I think that affected the market kind of the next 2 years. But this year, I think the people who are buying right now are a lot of investors, obviously, because they do have the excess capital and they want to deploy it. But you also have people who just truly need to move. So those people are kind of in a unique situation. But a lot of people who bought like right before COVID or right during COVID, they got really good interest rates, so they're not really in a rush to move. So definitely that makes sense, and it aligns with what you got going on as well. So to that, I guess I want to move, kind of kick the ball down a little more. Well, actually, let me take a circle back. When we looked at the house that you end up getting, you said, "Hey, I like it, but I need to think on it." So typically, this is where a realtor be like, "Hey, if you want it, you got to get the house. You got to put the offer in today." Now, I was like, "Okay, go ahead, think about it. No big deal." And if I'm not mistaken, we actually went back and seen, I think, another day or maybe 2 days later. So we had a few extra days to kind of figure it out. Yeah. Were you scared about waiting a few days to think about it based on what happened, everything else in the process? Because obviously that wasn't the first offer rewritten.
Right.
So can you talk us back about that? What that looked like?
Yeah. So I think, like I said, you gave me an opportunity to kind of go through my own emotions with the process, and I learned real quick that it was after that first home when I think we looked at a couple of more, and I said, let me hold off and let me think about it. And I think you gave me the heads up, like, hey, I mean, let's keep it short. Hey, man, there's a contract on the home, so I'm not even going to even waste your time with it. There's a contract on the home. Don't worry about it. And I think I just got in the car going home and you hit me up. So it was real quick. So I'm like, dang, I can't even think about it. So okay, so that was the other pivot I had to make. I was like, okay, based on what he told me, I don't really have much time to wait. So we went and saw the house that I'm in now. So we saw it. We walked around. I was iffy at first. I was super iffy, and I was like, and again, we know why I was iffy because I kind of told you about it. So I was like, I don't know about this, and I think what happened was I said, you know what, let's go see this other house. You know what I'm talking about, right? I said, let's go see this other property. So we went to that other property. Oh my gosh, that was. I talk about that one all the time. That home was I don't know if a tornado ran through it or what, but it was just weird. It was just super weird. So I think I was curious. I wanted information. Remember I said I want information. I said because something ain't right. I want to know who owns this home, and kind of felt like CSI in there, man. There was just certain things that was laying around that allowed us to get a little bit of information. So when we came back with the information, I said, "Oh, that's the same guy," or whatever. I said, "I don't know about this," and I think I told you I don't know if I can say this, but I told you to put an offer in on the home because I wanted to see what information. But I did actually think about trying to make it work. Like I said, if I do this and do this and do this, I wonder if I can make it work. I think we was walking around. I think you said, "Man, open it, don't open it." like so we just didn't know. But anyway, I just say all that to say that that prompted me to rethink that option. And so I think I went home, and again, Tony would always send the list over. So when you send the list over, when I woke up in the morning, I would look at that list. And out of everything that I looked at when the list showed up that just disappeared because it went in the contract, this home kept popping up. And after the third or fourth time it popped up, I said, yo, I think I want to check this out again. I said, is it still available? You said, yeah. I said, all right then. So we did that, but I also added another element to it. I brought a friend with me, and that I have a lot of respect for and trust, and they're going to keep it real with me. So I brought them with me as well, and I said, hey man, I'm bringing somebody with me. He's all right, cool. So I let them walk. Around, and I said, just tell me what you think. And what was good about that was they were going through the home process as well at the same exact time. So I think I want to say they closed 2 weeks before I did. So they was already going through the feel of it as well. And they kind of gave me the okay, like, yo, I think this would be good for you or whatnot. I said, okay. Just off of that, I said it right there. Go ahead, put offer in, man. And that's what it was. But I also didn't want to, I think by that time I was getting to a point, okay, I gotta make a decision. Whatever that decision is, got to be made now. So I didn't want to diddy bop on that. I didn't want to diddy bop on that too much no more. So that's where we were.
So to that, like, as a realtor, just so you guys know, the scariest thing that ever happened is for someone to bring a new person into the process, right? Not because we don't trust the information we give and we're trying to pull a fast one. Is that we don't know, one, who the person is, what information it is, or their thought process. So typically the majority of deals that get blown is because a third party to the transaction comes in and they give insight, right? I figured that. So as a realtor, it's always scary. Obviously, I was just like, ultimately, I want you to be happy and you feel like it's going to work out. So I'm like, cool. But that is always the scariest thing, whether it's your dad, your aunt, your mom, whoever. So, oh yeah, well, what about this? Like, again, it could go. Most deals derail the next first as soon as you got a third person.
I totally understand that from your perspective. Even though you didn't say that, I totally get it. But I guess still on the other end,
you need that confirmation. So I'm cool with it. But I'm like, in general, that's always the scariest thing because you have no idea. Especially if this is the first time you're meeting the person, you have no idea how this conversation is gonna go.
I never thought about it that way.
What questions they gonna ask you? Like it's like, bro, oh my god, another person. So that's always scary.
But this person, because I know them that well. Didn't ask no questions.
They just was there. It was like they were just. Like, I don't know what y'all talking about after we left, but it was just like, okay, cool.
Yeah, I told them, I said, go through. I said, just look through everything, and they was looking, and they was giving me pointers and saying this, saying that, but never shocked that they said I would do it. So they said I would do it. So I said, hey, all right, so that's all I needed.
It's probably the first time in realtor history that the third party actually like helped in the process. Just keep that. So to that, so a lot of people don't know, obviously. In the process, if you never bought, you take an inspection. The inspector goes through. They say, "Hey, these are some things that need to be addressed or potentially looked at." I have one or two inspectors I typically use in processes. This particular inspector, Eric, did hire. They came through and say, "Hey, these are a list of things that need to be fixed." Cool. I then take the list, give it to the other realtor, who then tells their client, "Hey, these are things we want to get fixed. What do we agree to fix or don't agree?" So sometimes this could stop the deal from going through. Sometimes it doesn't. In this case. I always ask for everything. Some realtors hate when you do that. They say, just pick the important stuff. But again, I asked for everything that was on the list. They say, yeah, we'll fix it. Boom, boom, boom. Obviously, if you haven't closed with me, what I typically do is 48 hours before we're supposed to close, I say, hey, we do a final walkthrough to make sure everything is to your liking. Everything we asked for to repair has been repaired. So they told us, hey, yeah, we're going to repair everything. Boom. We go do our walkthrough. They hadn't repaired everything on the list.
Right.
So I say, Eric, I don't think his lease was up, so I think he still had more time. But are you okay with me, stepping up and saying, hey, we're going to push this back, the closing back, so we can make sure we get things fixed, right? The worst thing on the other side of the transaction for the seller is they ready to close, or they ready to move on with their life, is to hear that, hey, we about to push the closing back, right? So we definitely started with, hey, that's the trump card. We're not ready to close. Y'all haven't fixed the things. Eric, I said, while I'm telling them this, I want you to figure out what you want, right? That way we can figure out how to rectify the situation. Because like I said, we got 2 days. If they haven't fixed it, they're not gonna fix it. Right. So I guess one, how was that scary for you to hear? Like, hey, they didn't fix the things they want to fix. Because again, I felt like they were simple fixes. But also, like a lot of people were like, hey, the deal's over at this point.
I looked at it as leverage to an extent. And the leverage was, again, this is me knowing I'm being in this field. The seller wants to close. And the seller is going to do, if they care that much to get to that point, they're going to do everything in their power, especially if it is not my fault. Because it wasn't my fault. This was something that you stated that you would do and you did not do it. And again, I didn't know the person, so I didn't know if he or she was trying to pull a fast one or anything like that. But to what Tony said was, and I understand this is pop, but let me give you all a tip. If you can help it, if you are closing and you are renting, again, everything was calculated. You're not sure how the calculation of the calendar window is going to play out, but mine actually played out to a T, which is, I ain't gonna lie, that was kind of magnificent because I didn't think it was going to do that because I think I started talking to you. I think I talked to you in May. Mm-hmm. I came back in. Talked to you like the end of May or something like that. By July, I had it approved as far as like credit approval. I had credit approval from the bank, and then probably by August we had something set. So they was ready to close in the end of September.
30 days.
30 days. What my situation was, my lease wasn't up until November, so I had 2 months to play with. So if this don't work, I still had a place to say. So I'm only bringing that up to, I get that, you want to do a simultaneous close or, you want to be sure, but that can get scary if something don't go right. And that just out of my own experience dealing with borrowers or customers with that, I tried to make sure that did not happen. Mm-hmm. So that was the advantage that I had. And Tony asked me, hey, what you want to do? I said, man, get it done. Like I said, nah, they going to have to do it. In this situation, they just said, how about this? And they gave a concession on what to do. So not saying that they fixed it, but they said, hey, this is what the seller is willing to give to make sure this deal closes through. Yeah, make sure it closed on time. And Tony asked me, was I cool with it? I said, yeah, I'm cool with it. Like, I'm cool with it. So
that's always a hard discussion because a lot of times. So for me as a realtor, it's hard to if the seller knows that, hey, you got to be at your house on Friday and it's supposed to close on Thursday. I have no leverage in the situation because they know you got to close. Right. So you having that cushion of basically a month and a half, I was able to say, yo, we pushing it back a week, and I'm like, oh dang, no, we're not willing to do that. Mm-hmm. So a lot of people be having the U-Haul packed up the morning of closing, like ready to move, and I'm like, you're not something may happen. Hopefully nothing does happen, but you don't give your realtor the opportunity to again flex their muscle and kind of make sure that you are whole before you get the keys. Because once you get the keys, whatever's wrong is now on your property, right?
I would advise if you cannot do that, don't. That's my opinion. But absolutely, everybody's different. Everybody have their own circumstances as to why it played out that way. I was fortunate enough to not have to do that, and I gave myself. So I looked at it two ways. I gave myself 30 days to say, "Hey, if this don't close, I'm just gonna pray on it. We're gonna figure it out." And then it also allowed me another month to figure, whatever. So I still felt in my mind I had another month to push come to shove. To try to look for something. I'm not saying that would have worked, but
it gave you a cushion.
It gave me a cushion. I just think as customers or borrowers that are buying a home, allow yourself a cushion because things like that can happen. Something could fall through on the seller's end, or something could fall through on your end, or your representation. You just never know. And I just want to be prepared for all three.
Yeah, and like I said, to that point, a lot of times, our previous episode, y'all hopefully hear it by now, but the previous episode we talked about that and how in that case we actually had to get a price reduction. Again, whenever that happens, a paperwork has to be sent back, things like that. So a lot of things have to happen anytime there's a stop in progress based on the original plan. In this case, we were able to do things just to make everybody whole. Mm-hmm. Eric was happy, things were happy, we moved forward with the process. So definitely like to keep that in mind. And also, of course, the inspection is worth it. That's my other point I was trying to drive home is some people are like, oh yeah, we don't really need an inspection, it's this, it's that. There's literally things that you can identify, and it can help you, again, get additional concessions in this case, as far as you're moving the process along. So, right. I don't. How can I ask this question? Looking at the community that surrounds your community now that's developed over time, I always tell. This is why, I know people love single family homes and all that. I like townhouses and condos specifically because typically, if you have those additional communities, going to be built around it because it's a more of a live work community.
Yeah.
Where single family homes, it depends on the demographics, which technically everybody can move how they want. But we have townhomes, condos. We have a lot of people who do move because again, it's going to be an eat, work, play area. In this case, we knew Topgolf was coming, stuff like that. But obviously, we live in Charlotte. Been living here for a while. You drive around, you see how things are changing. And like, dang, when did I get here? We're at the age where like, when did I get here? But to that point, obviously, like I said, he was against moving to university. He told you again all his objections, already. And then how, as we got into the process, those changed, and he warmed up to the idea. And it kind of, again, now happy ending. Obviously, he has additional equity in the house, and equity is why we do this, right? But I guess if you had to do anything differently, what would that be?
That's a good question. I think and I always say this, I think anything that I would do different, I probably would have did it a lot sooner and just took that leap. And I think it was just me being nervous or being scared of taking on that big of a commitment, financial commitment at that, because the mortgage still got to be paid, regardless of how you look at it, you know. And at least with you renting, again, the renting does take a little bit of the burden off of you, because if something breaks down, all you have to do is make that phone call or go online or put in that work order, and they'll get to it whenever they get to it. Hopefully when you get home, they'll have that sheet up there at your door saying, hey, somebody was in your house and we got it together. So that was always my thing. Like, I think that's probably the one thing that I would change. I think looking back at it, when I had the opportunity, I would have just said, look, let me just make this happen, figure it out, and I'll figure it out down the line. That could be ballsy, you know. that could be ballsy, but it definitely. I think if I would have done that, looking where I'm at right now, I think I would have. It would have opened a few more doors for me to do some different things and I'll kind of talk to you about offline, that I felt I could have got to. I could have got to. So that's the only thing.
But even so, that's a good point you make. So let's think. He closed the basically in November. So he moved up 1 November. Now it's pre-COVID, right? So now he more or less has a pick of any house he wants because the market is different. Obviously, he waited a year and the market completely shifted as far as inventory perspective, right? Obviously, no one knew the world was going to close and all that other stuff like that too.
Yeah,
but it literally, if he doesn't renew his lease the year before, the options that were available looked completely different just based on the total market and the fact that people were moving around like the world was just normal. Because it was normal at that time, right? Yeah. So again, you obviously don't know what's going to happen in the future. But definitely it's hey, if you have the means and you're thinking about it, this is probably the time to kind of move forward, get your ducks in a row, so that when you say, hey, I'm ready, you had a discussion with me, we can kind of march down that road.
Right.
So definitely say kudos to you for like seeing that process through. Going to transition to the part of the podcast where I allow you to ask me questions. So again, thank you for your insight about your homeownership journey. And yeah, go for it. What question do you have for me?
One question I have for you, and I think you and I have talked about this, and maybe we talked about it on my pod. I'm not sure, or the episode. I don't know. But let's redirect it over here.
Okay.
When it comes to refinancing, understanding that the market is different right now, what is your honest opinion about the idea of attempting to refinance or trying to find ways to free up money for your property?
Fair enough. So again, as I said, equity is why we play the game. I'm a fan of more so of HELOCs, which is a home equity line of credit, versus refinancing. And the reason is if you refinance, you're essentially starting your 30 years over. Your clock is starting over. And most times you don't want to do that, especially if you use a HELOC to free the money. However, if you do it multiple times, then maybe the refinance makes sense. So in my case, I did a HELOC, used that to get investment property. You can potentially, if there's more equity, I could have got a second HELOC, but I decided not to do that. So I ended up refinancing. But when you refinance, it wipes out the HELOC debt. Right? So it's a win-win in this case, and I was able to still to get the increments that my house has grown. Because like I said, I talked about in the last podcast, but my current house, my first house I own rather, is worth 3 times of what I paid for it. Right? So I was able to get equity out of it twice, 2 HELOCs, and then refinance.
Okay.
So I like that product because it frees up money. Most people ever won't have just a large lump sum of cash. You can do repairs, take vacations, purchase other properties, which is what I did. But you literally gives you the advantage of using the equity. Again, when we say he has about $100,000 equity, I know a bank right now that give him 90% of that in cash, right? And he can now do whatever he wants to that. And if he decides to sell, long as it sells for, again, with the current price plus 100, he has no debt from that process. There's no tax implications from that process either because it's tax-free money. It's essentially a credit card. I always use that example. It's essentially a credit card, but now it's his money and he can use it the way he wants to. So I love the HELOC product versus the refinance, but it's a point where the refinance makes sense. And again, that's just to wipe everything clean.
Yeah. Okay.
So it's the process to do that. So I wouldn't start off with the refinance just because, like I said, I don't see there's no reason to add 4 years in this case to your loan for no.
But it's also not. It don't make no sense to do that right now because
the interest rate.
Yeah.
But
So
it's just generally speaking,
Yeah.
Take interest out of it. That's my feelings. But now, obviously, it's an interest rate point. Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
Okay. All right. Shit, that was like really my main question. For an obvious reason.
Oh yeah,
you're
in a position where you got to figure out what to do with the equity, though, right?
Yeah, there's some things that I'm trying. I got some things brewing, and this could definitely help me make a decision. Make a decision on that. So that's why I want to ask that question. I guess my other question to you is like, and I ask you this all the time. Again, you and I talk a lot. Where we see like an article or something like that, we'll pass it to each other. Just to converse about it, or I'm asking you questions about something that I've seen or anything like that. So with that being said, because I think the last time we probably talked was probably 2 or 3 months ago. So the market is heavily changing. Charlotte is definitely changing. Like, so what have you seen so far? What is it that you like now about the market in Charlotte right now?
It's a lot of builders building. So I always tell people, like, historical perspective, the reason why the housing market went the way it did in Charlotte is builders stopped building after the 08-09 crash. They just were scared to build, not knowing if people were going to buy. So that's really like and not just in Charlotte, everywhere. That's why I have a national shortage, but specifically in Charlotte. So what I see now is I see people building everywhere. Like if you get in your car right now, drive any direction, 15 minutes to and from out of town, you see construction. Whether that's apartments or townhouses or, like I said, just everywhere. So I like the growth aspect of that's happening in Charlotte right now. I like the fact that I think the what is the area called? By the airport, they're about to have the River District.
River District.
That is about to be crazy. Just looking at the renderings that they have, the community, and again, that's kind of ties into like a bigger project already. That's where we already have Outlet Mall over there. So like I said, that area is going to be crazy. If you look at the 28208 zip code area, which is basically Betty Ford area, kind of the west side, that area is growing like crazy with businesses. And so I feel like this is a good time to be in Charlotte. Whether you decide to buy or just rent, this is a good time to be in Charlotte. It's a lot of growth. Obviously, if you have the means to buy, I would always suggest you do that because you'll be a part of the progress. And again, you get equity to kind of figure out what to do in 5 to 10 years from now.
Right.
But like I said, I see Charlotte growing like crazy. Like I said, I'm interested to see once they truly start developing the River District project. Obviously, it's a few more regulation things they have to cover before it's finished. But that community, I think, is going to be crazy, especially with the closeness to the airport. I know we talked about high-speed trains before, too.
Yeah.
I don't know how long that project's going to be, but they talk about high-speed train from here to Atlanta. That would be awesome. So I'm definitely looking for if that project comes to fruition. So, yeah, like I said, just the 2040 plan, again, if you haven't read it or try to find it, figure out what's important to you. If you're looking to invest and or buy, that'll kind of give you direction on where you should go. But yeah, I mean, like I said, it looks like Charlotte is headed in the right direction across the board.
One last question: Do you see many duplexes now in Charlotte?
So they're doing the duets. So it's basically townhome, so to speak. Like if you go into the area right near Smith, that's literally all it is. So it's two houses side by side, which is essentially people would say, hey, that's a townhouse, but it's only just 2 of them, so it's a duet. So the duplexes are side by side versus the traditional style. And if you go in the area near Smith, they pretty much was knocking houses down and building them up. So I mean, it's all brand new community, and they're all duets. One, they're basically using the same lot size, but they're able to get their more bang for the buck. And then is vertical, which is kind of the new thing. So instead of having a traditional 2-story home, you now have a 3-story, I guess you want to call it duet, and you have 2 families. So you sell it to this side and that side. So people, I think, like that. Whether now you can sell it or rent it on the back end. Obviously, if you're original purchaser of it, but that's I think where the market is going for Charlotte. If you look at cities like Texas, they're doing that as well. I think the model city for Charlotte is Austin, Texas. Don't quote me on that, but I think it is. But you see a lot of that in Texas as well happening. Obviously, they have lots of land, but I think duets is our thing more than traditional duplexes. You might have to go down 85 a little bit to get some of those.
Okay.
In either direction.
Okay. So now this is just an opinion question. What do you think about what do you think about the container homes and tiny homes?
Dude, I think it's a festival today in Kannapolis or Concord. Now I think about it. It's a 2-day festival on tiny homes. Dang, I'm gonna check the time schedule as soon as we get off this and check it out. But yeah, I think that's what you're going. I think that every product makes sense for the right person, right? I think that I've seen some rendering, some models. I'm like, yo, this is a container home. Like,
They got them in Concord.
Right?
They got some in Concord somewhere.
Yeah,
maybe that's what you talk about.
It's a festival literally going on this weekend. So I'm gonna definitely check it out. But I think for the right person, it's a good alternative to, again, renting or things like that. But I think everybody has to have an open mind. Some people have very, how can I say this without being offensive? Some people have very rigid ideas of what home ownership should look like, even if they don't have necessarily the means for what that should look like. So they kind of pigeonhole themselves and not getting the equity, not getting the things that beneficial as a homeowner, because they feel like it has to only look one way. And I don't think it only looks one way. I know it doesn't only look one way. So that being said, like I said, I think for the right person, it's a great vehicle. I've seen some trailers like that are awesome, right? So like I said, I think it just depends on the person and kind of their mindset into the process, and most people won't. But to that point, you could probably get several of them and start a destination Airbnb. So there's a lot of things you can do with it if you have the mindset and the kind of the forward thinking.
Okay. All right.
So it's going to probably be way more common, especially since we have festivals in the area now. Way more common in the future than it is now. So that's my 2 cents.
That's my 5 cents. Those are my questions.
All right. Well, do me a favor real quick and give us your socials. Let people know how they can connect with you.
I got two of them. So I'm gonna start with, since I am a podcaster. My podcast is called Who Got Next, and that is based out of here in Charlotte, where I sit down with a lot of familiar faces in Charlotte that are doing some great work in their field of whatever that is. Pretty much, I built some great relationships and some great networks since I've been here, and I was able to see a lot of these individuals that I spoke to on my podcast build from the ground up. So, if they were a promoter or started a business and probably had 2 or 3 people there, I circle back around and they have thousands. They stuck to what they're doing. So I'm having conversations, kind of like what Tony's doing right now. So my podcast IG is Who Got Next _CLT. And then my personal page, if you choose to follow that, I will follow back. It is EDub _1906.
All right, so we want to obviously thank Eric for being on the podcast. Again, I want to encourage you to truly listen to this episode, take notes on it, understand the mindset that he had coming into the home ownership process, and take from it what you will. But I believe if we had more people, potential buyers like him, it would make the process not only easier for the people that's helping you get into the home, but it make it easier for you. Again, having a clear mind, obviously having some determination, commitment, and it makes the process just that much easier for you. And then it allows you to work with people who have similar temperaments to kind of what you want as well. So again, Eric, thank you for being on the podcast. Uninvited House Guest, again, would not be started if he wasn't for this man in the room today. So again, we thank you for sharing your talents with the world and of course, Charlotte.
No, man, I appreciate it, man. Again, appreciate you having me on. I've had a chance to check out several episodes, and you're definitely hitting on some key points and some key content with different aspects of home buying, from, talking to people who started an Airbnb, or, just investing in things like that, man. So I do appreciate that, man. I think you put some dope content out there, man. I'm definitely going to keep checking it out.
All right, appreciate it. And that's the show. Peace.
Peace.